the school board. Community input is encouraged and welcomed. Input must be informational in nature and address the entire board rather than one particular member. The Board of Education cannot engage in discussion or debate in response, but will take the information for review and direct to the appropriate district employee to respond. And there is nobody here. They're all warm at home, so nobody's here tonight to join us. This meeting is being live streamed. Login information can be found on the district website. It is also being recorded and will be made possible as soon as possible and put on the district YouTube channel. The meeting is now called to order. It is January 5th, 2022, 6:33 p.m. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, and prepare and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. And Elle Dahlgren will be so kindly to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Al. And then can you please call roll for tonight?
Andreasen.
Here.
Al Dahlgren is here. Zach Dorholt. Dr. Les Green is not here yet, but he is coming. Shannon Haas.
Here.
Natalie Ringsmuth.
Here.
And Monica Segura Schwartz is absent this evening. The following cabinet members and staff are present at the district office. Superintendent Willie Jett, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education, Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education, Dr. Mike Rivard, Director of Community Engagement and Communications, Tammy DeLand, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services, Amy Skellerud, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations, Tracy Flynn Bowe, Executive Director of Operations, Gary Ganji, Media Technicians, Paul Novak and Gordy Scott, and Custodian on Site, Steve Hain. The following cabinet members are virtually present. Director of Equity, Ayan Omar, Executive Director of Community Education, Adam Holm, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, Lori Posch, Executive Director of Research, Assessments, and Enrollment, Donna Roper, Executive Director of Student Services and Special Education, Carol Potter, and Executive Assistant, Jan McGuire.
Thank you, Al. Next, I'm looking for a motion to approve tonight's Board of Education meeting and work session agenda.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Scott and a second by Natalie. Al, can you call roll?
Who made the motion? Scott?
Scott and then Natalie.
Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren is yes. Zach Dorholt. Yes. Dr. Les Green is not here. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Natalie Ringsmuth.
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of personnel staff changes. Item B, approval of monthly treasurer's report for November. Item C, approval of monthly financial report for November. Item D, approval of Board Policy 605, alternative programs as revised, third reading. Item E, approval Board Policy 608, instructional services, SPED as revised, third reading. And item F, Katherine Johnson Education Center project change orders totaling $16,869.01. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Looking for approval of tonight's consent agenda as read.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Natalie and a second by Scott. And Al, can you call roll one more time?
I sure can. Let the record show that Les Green is here. It's 6:37 PM.
Thank you.
Okay, who made the motion again? I missed it.
Natalie?
Natalie? Natalie Ringsmith.
Yes.
Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Al Dahlgren is a yes. Zach Dorholt. Dr. Les Green. Consent agenda.
I will abstain if I didn't hear.
Okay. And Shannon Haas.
Yes. All right, thank you.
And I'll pass the torch over to you, Dr. Green.
Okay, moving on to discussion and action items. First up for an action item, we have approval of purchase agreement for Clark Field. This is presented tonight by Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Jett, members of the board. I'm sure we're all aware and recall that we've previously had the board approve a purchase agreement related to the former Tech High School and Media Services properties. At that time, the Clark Field property was not included in that transaction, but at this point, both the city and the school district desire to transfer that as a green space park facility to the city of St. Cloud. The city has already approved the transfer, and we do have a closing tentatively scheduled for this Friday, January 7th, pending board approval. One other thing to note, you'll see the purchase agreement is in the board agenda. The purchase agreement exactly mirrors the purchase agreement that the board approved for the tech transfer. Also in the agenda packet is a memorandum of understanding related to the future Neenah Creek Regional Park. That is a park facility that the city plans to construct on the property adjacent to the new Tech High School. As part of this transfer, the city has agreed to develop that memorandum for mutual cross-utilization of facilities so that we have additional softball fields, multipurpose fields, baseball fields, and so you'll see that memorandum is in the board agenda as well. Are there any questions on the purchase agreement?
Can you just tell me, is there, so the location of the Neenah Creek is with the Tech High School, and then these fields, very much needed. Is there, can you explain the parameters of that? Do we have first rights? Who else can be there? Is there a length of time that we get to be first in line for our needs?
Not kind of a minimum or a set length of time. The memorandum would really kind of be a in perpetuity type of agreement. So the intention of both parties is that kind of, as long as needed. So we would have that access on both sides. So if the city were, hosting something at that facility and, had a reason to want to use our facility, it's just across the creek, so there'll be multiple access points. There isn't a set timeline yet in terms of when that will be completed, but certainly the city has expressed their intention to work with us when those are needed. As far as whether that's a first right type of a thing, certainly, I think that depends on the advance notice. If the city has booked something far out in advance, I don't think, there's nothing in the agreement that would give us the right to bump someone else, who may have an event booked. But certainly both parties have every intention of working together for those shared facilities.
And the maintenance and upkeep on the park property, that's the city's
Correct, yep.
responsibility? Okay.
Do you have any idea what the procedure will be for booking these areas? I mean, do we book through the city or through the city park system? For example, let's say we're going to run a softball game, long-term, where we're going to need an extra diamond or something like that. We would be able to book every Wednesday night for 3 months or.
Yeah, the city has a department that, just like we have our department that manages booking of our facilities. The city has, their comparable department that we would make those arrangements through. We already work with the city a lot in terms of those arrangements. We use city facilities at the MAC for hockey and baseball. We use some park shelters in the winter for Nordic skiing. So we're already accustomed to, and our activities directors are already familiar with a lot of those contacts that we need to reach out to. At this point, that's something that's further down the road. The Nina Creek facility isn't in certainly the city's, 1 to 2 year plan. That's still to be determined based on, their budgets and funding and where they're at as to when that will actually be completed. But yes, we'll have a process in place to do that.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so this is an action item, looking for board approval. Les, can you please call roll?
I would move that we approve the purchase agreement for Clark Field
Second.
City.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Al, second by Natalie. All right, now Les, you're on.
I had a question.
Oh, yeah, please.
Seems to me there was two things that needed to be signed. One was the memorandum and the other was the purchase agreement. The motion, should that be adjusted to include the signing of the memorandum?
So the memorandum doesn't require board approval. The city council, that's more of an administratively approved document. And so we are having the board only approve the purchase agreement, which is the same as what the city did, just in the interest of keeping things consistent between the two entities. That was their preference, is that based on their requirements and based on statute, the memorandum doesn't need board approval.
Thank you.
So your motion is to approve the purchase agreement, correct? Okay. Discussion? Okay, so we have a motion by Al, second by Natalie. Now, Les, can you please call roll?
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Natalie Ringsmuth,
Yes.
Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Les Green is yes, Zach Dorhold, Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, next up, another action item, approval of the 2022 Board of Education Legislative Platform presented tonight by Chair of the Legislative Committee, Board Member Zachary Dorholt.
So was there a hard copy passed around?
I had one in my email, so I think, is it
Okay.
on the,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. Oh,
can you
I'm supposed to go up there, sure.
make it official? Thanks, you guys are amazing.
Thank you for having me We're on this. So, this is kind of different. It's intense from this view. We should create a circle so whomever's sitting here can feel a little more equal. No changes other than just some dates on here to recognize that it's 2022. And this is kind of what went through last week. Eliminate the special education. And thought the timing of asking for this right now couldn't be better with a projected $7 billion surplus. Why not go big with just this one? So I don't know if you have any questions. We're all intimately familiar with how this impacts our district, and because of efforts of still current and past board members and others, this is now the special education cross subsidy has now become common language throughout the state in education. So I would ask for approval 2022 legislative platform from the board.
Okay, Scott has a question?
Yeah, okay, once we approve this thing, what do we do with it?
That I was going to ask too, whether we'll formally deliver it to all the representatives, senators who even touch District 742, letting them know. I thought I'd throw out there whether we do a letter to the editor, whether it's as chair of this committee, as a board together, just looking at the logistics for that, but I thought at least a letter to the editor from myself as chair of the committee would be one thing. And then it's up to us to reach out to our elected officials at the state and advocate for this policy.
Is it also going to be submitted to the MSBA and the other one?
Kind of already had, Al did that.
Al did that, okay.
You want to say more to that?
I would submit a press release to all 3 news outlets. It doesn't have to be real wordy, but just the Board of Education passed their legislative platform, and this is, and then a copy of it along with it.
I like that idea.
That's something you'll be doing then?
I'll figure that out, yeah. We'll go through the proper channels. So,
Oh, yeah.
Wanna go
we've got
rogue.
Tammy, she can do it.
okay. So she's not, Tammy's nodding yes. Okay.
I like this, Zach, so thank you very much. It's simple and it's clean, and I think our central Minnesota community and outside of that has been in an educational learning curve to understand what this is and what this means for our district, to really wrap your mind around what that means, because I think there were big misconceptions
Yeah.
to what this is. And I think people are learning that and understanding that. And this just goes directly to, this is what we need.
I would move that we approve the 2022 legislative platform.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Al and a second by Natalie. Les, can you please call roll?
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Natalie Ringsmith,
Yes.
Shannon Hawes,
Yes.
Les Green is yes, Zach Dorhold,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren, I'm sorry, Scott Andreasen.
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is our third action item for tonight, approval of legal counsel rates for Ford and Harrison, presented tonight by Tracy Flinbo, Executive Director of Human Resources. Okay, and this was tabled from the consent agenda of our reorganizational meeting on Monday, January 3rd of 2022, being brought forward with a little bit more information for us.
Thanks, Gordy. All right, thank you. Ford and Harrison is our immigration counsel that we use primarily to support our immersion program staff that are here under H-1B visas. They have proposed an hourly rate of $365 an hour and a rate for our H-1B cases at $37.50. That $37.50 per case is a decrease of $250 from what was proposed earlier this week at the meeting after discussions with them, and it's an increase of $250 over last year's rates. Just to answer questions that board members had about the number of H-1B cases that we have in the school district, we have at this time 9 of our staff that are here teaching on H-1B visas. Those are 3-year visas, and so typically we have 3 of those per year approximately that are in the renewal process. So we're talking about 3 of those cases per year that are being handled by that law firm. Any other questions I can answer?
Yeah, thank you. So looking for a motion to approve legal counsel rates for Ford and Harrison. Okay, so I have a motion by Scott and a second by Les, and then Les, can you please call roll?
Scott Andreasen,
Yes.
Les Green is yes, Zach Dorhold, Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Shannon Hawes.
Yes.
Natalie Ringsmuth.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to Board of Education Standing Committee reports presented by the committee chairs. We just have one tonight, I believe, and that's Dr. Les Green presenting the meeting Personnel Negotiations Committee.
Right, we did not have a meeting, and this process of a new superintendent and salary negotiations and things like that are new to me. And so I've been kind of shy about how to do this. And so what we finally worked out is something I think that makes sense, and I'd like to propose this right now. Just so people understand what's happened, the board chair has sent a letter of intent to hire to Dr. Putnam as the superintendent beginning July 1st of 2022. Dr. Putnam has provided written affirmation of her commitment to accept that position, subject to negotiations of a contract. Accordingly, the board chair and I will be initiating negotiations with Dr. Putnam on the terms of that contract. We've reviewed Superintendent Jett's contract and believe that since this template has been previously negotiated, reviewed, and approved by the Personnel Committee and the full board, it is an appropriate template to use for the new contract for the new superintendent. The only term of the contract that needs to be negotiated is the salary level for the 3 years of the contract period. What we propose to do is the board chair and I will review comparable salary data with Dr. Putnam to negotiate a proposed contract that we will bring back to the board for review and approval at a subsequent meeting in February. If that's acceptable to the board, then we can, that's what I'd like to do to negotiate the contract. Questions? Does that, first of all, does it make sense? Is it, haven't confused anybody? Okay.
Were you going to provide a copy of the template?
Yeah.
Before?
Yes, you'll receive it within the day.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
And then thoughts about salary. How much, I don't know, I didn't sit in when, for any superintendent hires and negotiations of contracts and wages. So what in the past has been the board's involvement in wage negotiations and?
Well, there are two options. And I have not sat, but Al may have, but here's the two options. One is that you and I can, the chair and the Personnel Committee chair can look at the data, comparable data for superintendent pay, and then develop a recommendation to the board, and the board can then talk about that. The other option is that the board sit and do that entire look at the data and then make proposals for what that salary should be.
So there's data out there that talks about wages of superintendents and the number of students that they are responsible for, so their district size. I think I'm looking for input, Al, that previous times that you've been involved in that, but all board members, what is your participation, interest, and where do you see your role in this?
I think in the past it's been. In the past, it's been the board chair and the personnel committee chair that have worked together. It's really been driven a lot by the board chair, especially back when certain members were on the board. But it has been driven by the board chair and the personnel chair to come up to do the negotiation and come up with, but it has always used the comparables and then an understanding of where the superintendent is in the, as a first year superintendent, you can't compare that to a similar sized district with a 20-year superintendent. that there's going to be some differences in those, but to fall within ranges is pretty typical. And we also have history of having a superintendent in this district, and that certainly should weigh in on it. And there may be, I'm not saying that you just take the exact same salary and place it on the new superintendent, that there should be some negotiation back and forth and there are going to be some differences in the contract, but we're trying to come up with something that's fair and equitable and good for everybody, good for us and good for Lori.
Scott, please join in.
Yes, does Tracy at Human Resources have anything to do with this, or this just with
No.
the board?
This is board. Yep, this is our job. But somebody gathered the data for us. I'm assuming Tracy and her team.
Yeah. Yep.
So the point is that we can sit as a 7-member board and review that data together, back and forth, or the chair and I can, you'll get the data anyway, you'll know what we looked at. The chair and I can come up with what we think is, and Dr. Putnam, I'm sorry, would be included in that discussion. Sorry about that, Lori. Dr. Putnam would be included in that discussion as we do with other contract things we do. We come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Les. I would say that if we were going to do it as a board, we'd do it in a closed meeting as far as the contract negotiations. And we would come up with parameters as a board, similar to what we had as parameters for the other contract settlements. And then it would go to the two of you to sit down with Lori and work through it.
So we have met once and covered a lot of ground, I thought, in the meeting. I don't know if Lori, if you would agree with that, but the contract and went through that in details, and then started to look at the comparables, the district sizes, their wages, to look at that and have a really good start in this of where we think we're at. So I'm thinking, if you wanted to meet again, but what is the next step? When we present, I would love to have you jump in. What was that? Were you jumping in? 'Cause
That's what don't go to an auction.
you just bid at something. Sold.
Here-
I say that
wait,
first
wait.
I'd come up with a timeline, and then I'd say next step. But if next step is to meet with the board and have a discussion as to parameters, I'd still want to know what's a timeline. When do we want to have this wrapped up by? And kind of plot it out so that, there's no emergency on this, I don't think. I'm looking at you, Lori. But I don't think there's it doesn't have to be done by February 1st or something. It has to be done by July 1st.
Well,
So-
my preference would be that we get this finalized
Yes.
by the last meeting in February.
Okay.
That is, because I think the groundwork's been laid. When you look at the contract template, that was the ground we covered.
Yep.
The only thing that has not been discussed is the salary, because I didn't want to start that discussion until we had some opportunity for the board to weigh in on
Yep.
this thing.
But I think it's also important, we should all have an opportunity to see the
Yep.
template and an opportunity to give feedback on that if we
Right.
feel something would need to be addressed within that template. So I would say that would be done at a close probably after our next meeting. So the January, whatever that date would be on our next meeting.
So at a closed
A closed session,
session,
yep, to set parameters. And then the board would hand it off to you two.
Okay.
And you would have to negotiate with Lori and come back with a proposal.
Natalie?
But then after the last meeting, after the next meeting, could you guys have met before then and looked at the comparables by then and make your suggestion to us? And then we have that whole thing out of the way, and then the next step is negotiations with Lori?
Yes, because I'm feeling really good that we're
Yes.
close
would
to
be
that.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Great, wonderful.
Yeah, so when we meet 2 weeks from now, we would have,
We'll have all of that done.
yeah, a starting point of where we think that we should be at. We're proposing this, let's talk about it. That's-
Okay. Let me just, this is, I think what I want to be real careful about this. I want to know whether you want us, whether the board wants the chair and I to recommend a salary, or whether you want us to sit with you in a closed session and talk about a range.
Yes, please.
Good evening. I have Tracy listening, and so one of the things that she just wants the board to know, and you might not be saying it like this, but just making sure that you hear it, that you're not supposed to, or you can't have a closed session to negotiate superintendent contract, only with certified bargaining units. Okay.
That's what I was
And
just
so
looking at. Thank you.
And you said, how did you phrase that? I made a mistake and moved, and so it was like an auction?
Yeah.
So, okay. And so with that, as I'm sitting here, and I'm not in this, I look up at the superintendent-elect, and so I feel funny for her with this discussion happening at the moment. So I'm just putting that out there. In my tenure of being here, everything that you've talked about in terms of how it goes, the board chair, the personnel chair, that's all in sync with everything I've ever experienced. And then the conversation with the superintendent. And the one thing, Al, you talked about the timeline. And so, yep, that was definitely something that was always, you kind of knew what that was going to be. And then you talked about the template being shared with the board. And so I always knew that template was shared with all board members. And then what I remember, and I might be wrong, but what I recall is board members had conversation with the chair, or they had conversation with the personnel chair. That's how it kind of took place. And then the two individuals collectively met with the superintendent, and that happened at that moment. So in other words, individual board members got a chance, as they were looking at the template, to make their comments to the chair and to the personnel chair. Just my experience in the past. Not going to talk about my first experience, but the other ones, because you smiled.
Can I make a recommendation? Let me recommend that we send you all the data that we will have, and that the chair and I will meet with Dr. Putnam and have a discussion about the salary, and then present that as a recommendation to the board in February.
Can I ask, does it need to be, is there a need, is there a requirement to have it a line item on a board agenda? Or is this something that,
I don't know, what have
You know-
other contracts been?
The board has to approve the contract.
the board has to approve the
Sure, yeah,
contract? Okay.
Sure.
So yes, it does have to be, but I'm just, Les, when you say you'll send us all the information, you can't send us all the information unless it's public.
Well, I think it should be. I mean, we have the template
The template can be public.
and the range of what we've looked at in terms of what the comparable districts look like.
That can
all
be,
it
that's
would be.
public, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. I agree with that, and then it would be in the hands of you two
Okay.
to sit down and negotiate and come back to the board with your recommendation.
Okay. 3.
Well, the only thing would be missing.
We're including
is-
Lori.
Well, right,
Right.
the you
okay.
two from the board
Right. Okay.
to sit down and negotiate, but then the only thing that would be missing is that there isn't a pre-approval necessarily from the board on that to say, yes, we support this, or no, we don't support this, so. But I think you know what we'd support and what we wouldn't, so.
Okay, so we could have Jan send out those two items that will be part of the agenda anyway, when this gets put on an agenda,
Yes,
right? So
template.
the template and the data of school
Tracy,
districts.
Tracy Flinbo would be sending that. to the
Tracy
board.
will send those two items out, okay?
Okay, good. I'm sorry this is, I mean, I'm new at this, and I think that I've never been involved in this part of the superintendent things. I just wanted to make sure I was not overstepping and suggesting the board shouldn't be involved in it or whatever. So,
Yeah,
and I have to apologize to Lori because she must be wondering if she's following a crazy hound dog around because I keep.
No. And Lori, just for your benefit, you know, this is just the first of many awkward.
Can, Chair Hawes, can I just say one more thing?
yes,
And
please.
again, I'm not in it. Historically speaking, and I'm just saying this because I remember Al being board, either board chair or the personnel chair at one of the times or one of the go-rounds. And so me having the conversation with you, personnel, I think so. And so you're talking about the template, okay? And you can see it's my contract is a public document, okay? So the entire world looks at that public document. So that's what's coming, and that's what Tracy would be sending. The comparables, members of the community would need to go to websites and other avenues to find those superintendent contracts, because everybody's is public. But there are some, what do I want to say? There are some documents or things that are shared amongst superintendents, not superintendents, or amongst HR directors or within certain things, or the superintendent, I'm not going to name the district that he's in, but he gathered it. He called all of us to see certain things. And those are not necessarily a public document. You could gather that if you went and did it all on your own, but the spreadsheet or the Google Doc that has in it, or the info that's in that, that's not a document that the world actually sees. And so I'm just throwing that out there. The thing that historically that has been shared with the community or provided is the template or what now is my contract. And so I'm just saying that out loud.
What I'm throwing out there, though, Willie, is that if something is shared with all 7 members of the board,
Yeah.
it has to become a public document.
Completely agreed. And so part of where I'm really going with that is the board, the template, my contract, in the past, that has been shared with the entire board. The comparables I've witnessed with the personnel chair and the board chair. I've not necessarily witnessed that in my history or my tenure as a document being sent to the entire board. That was my rationale for saying that.
So where I'm stuck at is when we come up with a dollar figure that we think is very reasonable and makes sense, that the comparables are what support our data, and is that public, is that for the public to see those numbers or not? And I get it that this isn't an official document.
It's all public. It's all public somewhere, because all of those superintendents' contracts. So I would say that there's no real danger.
What I've witnessed in the past is the chair of personnel and the chair of the board share the ranges with board members. That's what I recall, that you shared the ranges with individuals. And with that, Elvis is leaving the building in this conversation.
Okay. Okay, that
Right.
works for me.
Good. What I will do and what we will do is sit down and figure out what we're going to send to the board. I'm a little concerned about the concept of justification for what we come up with. I think we're going to look at it and decide what makes sense, and then
Yes.
we'll come forward with that. And again, I'm sorry this has been so confusing, but I just want to make sure that everything is clear, fair, and that we don't wind up with somebody saying, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. And so, not amongst the board, just anywhere. So, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I have my marching orders.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, then future agenda items. Board of Education members may suggest items or topics for future board meeting agendas to the Board Development Policy and Governance Committee. The January regular board meeting topics will include a student activities account and overview of changes made to district practices and procedures relative to arts and activities that meet the needs of our students. This meeting is now adjourned. It is 7:13 PM, and we're opening up the Board of Education work session. First up is Staff Demographics Report, presented by Tracy Flinbo, Executive Director of Human Resources.
Hey, Tracy, can you just clarify on that? I mean, it's not super important, but just for my own curiosity. You can negotiate, you can have a closed session for bargaining groups, but you cannot have a closed session for negotiation strategy for,
That's correct. The statute
Individuals?
specifically says that you have statutory authority to close to have labor negotiation strategy sessions regarding a certified bargaining unit under
Okay.
PELRA.
wow.
That's why we can't talk about non-represented groups in those contexts either.
I learned something tonight.
I should ask a follow-up to that, but in the statute, does it explicitly state the superintendent thing, but where? Maybe I'll just look at it myself.
Yeah, the statute specifically says you can close to have, to discuss contract negotiation strategy with bargaining groups certified under PELRA. And so an individual contract with an executive, another employee, including the superintendent, wouldn't qualify.
Does it say we can't?
You can only close if you have statutory authority to close.
Okay, thank you.
All meetings must be open unless there's a specific statutory authority to close. Okay. Good evening again, board members. I'm here to do the annual report about the demographic makeup of our school district staff. And I think as I begin that, a relevant question is, why do we monitor the racial makeup of our students and our staff and report out to the board each year about that? I think the next slide answers that question, that the research, and we've looked at this research deeper each year. I'm not going to go into all of the studies that we've reviewed over the years, but the research is really clear that a racially diverse staff academically benefits both students of color and white students alike, according to lots of the research that we've looked at. Specifically, having a diverse staff is critical to increasing the academic performance of all student groups, to preparing our students to learn and live and work in a racially diverse and global world, to provide equitable educational opportunities for all of our students. And that's the context, I think, as we have this conversation each year, is to think about how do we create that racially diverse staff to reflect both our community and our student body. This slide just demonstrates kind of the challenge of this work, right? While we know that this is what the research tells us about the positive impact of a racially diverse school staff, we also know that it's a challenge because of the percentage of teachers of color that are in the teaching workforce. In the state of Minnesota, that number sits at about 5%, 4 to 5%, depending on the year. But the challenge then for school districts across the state and the nation is how do we diversify our staffs with a limited supply of teachers in that workforce. This next slide is very difficult to read on the screen, and you all have a copy of it, so it makes it a little easier. And in the copy that you have, you also see on the far right-hand corner the comparison to last year in each of the categories. I'll break this down in slides that are a little bit easier for everybody to look at, but this is just the big overview that breaks down that staff, not just for teachers of color, but for all staff of the district. As we think about the impact of all of our staff have the ability to influence that course of a student's academic experience here in our school district. And so we're looking at teachers probably specifically, but importantly, we're looking across all of our employee groups, and that's what this particular spreadsheet will show you. It also shows you the racial demographics of the state and county, Stearns County area being one of the largest counties that we serve. And you can see that our demographics are really trending to match the Stearns County demographics. I think the goal is, as we think about having a workforce that mirrors the community, is to look at what's the percentage of racial diversity in the community, and are we attracting and matching that same diversity in our school district? And you can see that on the overall numbers, we have about 87% of our staff are white and 13% are people of color. And that's really close to what our Stearns County racial diversity is at 14% roughly. I think it's easier to see this information broken down than in that chart, so we'll take you through a few slides that break that down by different employee groups and student groups. So this is an 8-year snapshot of our student data, just showing the racial diversity of our student data from 2013 to current. And you see that currently we are at 61.30% students of color in our student body. If we look at our non-licensed racial diversity, you see that we've grown since 2013 from 6.45% to 18.86% in the last year. And this would include our bus drivers, cooks, custodians, clerical employees, language interpreters, department staff, paraeducators, behavior staff, and so on. These are all the staff other than teachers, really, in the non-licensed category that make up our important educational team. If I go back to that slide just quickly, again, you can see at 18.86%, we are significantly outpacing even the overall 14% diversity in the Stearns County area, which tells me that we've become an employer of choice for our BIPOC community. They're seeing this as a place to work and grow with our district. If we go now specifically to teacher racial diversity, as I said earlier, the challenge in this area is with the state teacher workforce made up of just 4 to 5% teachers of color. All districts across the state struggle to, get above that threshold because of that. And so I'm happy to report that, you can see a very positive trend line, and we've been sitting north of 6% for the last 3 school years. Which again puts us above that state average, which says there's something happening in our district that's attracting above the trend line. In the past school year, I would point out that we hired 97 teachers. I'll have a slide a little bit later that will show you some historical data about that. And of those 97 teachers, 12.37% were teachers of color. So we are seeing that, particularly in recent years, we're growing the new teacher pool at a very significant pace over what the state would predict. This next slide represents our administrator racial diversity, and so this would include principals and directors and district leaders, all of the folks that serve on our administrative team across the district. And I think I'm particularly proud of this work that we've done here at we've been over 20% for the last 3 years in our administrators. And I think as we have analyzed what has made the difference for us in attracting staff of color, I think it's this slide, right? It tells us, I think, that if we have administrators of color at the table that are supporting the work that we do in terms of policy making and responding to the academic and social, emotional, and behavioral needs of our students, I think that presence at that level of leadership encourages that attraction for staff and teachers to join our district as well. This is then total district staff. If we take everybody all together, you can see again this very significant and steady increase in our diversity over the past 8 years at 12.51% for this past year. This next slide I think is helpful because it just reminds us why it's difficult to influence our increase in diversifying our workforce when we end up at the end of this funnel. The teacher educator pipeline starts at that post-secondary enrollment, and it ends with us, and our typical place of influence has been at recruiting people to enter our workforce after completing their teacher education and preparation programs, and then retaining those teachers once they get here. We've been trying to flip the model, knowing that what's coming out of the bottom of that funnel is not very wide, by going to the top of the pool, and we're going to create our own through our Grow Your Own programs and other programs to try to influence the number of teachers that are tied and committed to our school district that are entering that post-secondary world and entering into teacher preparation programs. We looked at this slide last year, but I'll remind you that although I'm talking about 4 and 5% in the state of Minnesota, when we get into outstate Minnesota, in our region in particular, we're typically looking at a supply of teachers of color of just over 1%. And so with that context, I think the progress that we've made is particularly impressive. And again, it tells me that something that we're doing here in this district is creating an environment where teachers of color feel like they can come here, they can make a difference, and they can receive the support that they need and deserve to be successful in our district. This is the new teacher hiring that we've done in the last 4 years, and so you can see that depending on the year, we hire between 70 and 100 teachers a year typically, and in all of those years, we're significantly outpacing the state numbers for teachers of color. So again, I think there's a solid evidence of our ability to attract and recruit teachers of color to our district for all the reasons that we've talked about. If we think about those teachers of color again, and we talked just briefly about the research, but I will just focus in on those 4 most important factors that we see from the research, why this makes a difference for our school district. Number 1, it improves student achievement, and again, we know from the research that's true both for students of color and for white students. We know that we get better social and emotional learning outcomes for students, and that students, both students of color and white students, present more positive perceptions of the staff as a whole and of their teachers as a whole when we have a more diverse teaching staff. From an HR standpoint, and that idea of being able to not only recruit but then retain teachers of color, as we grow that workforce with more racial diversity across the district, it reduces that level of isolation that teachers of color feel in our school district, and it provides more affinity groups for those staff to feel supported in our district. So growing that number really makes a difference for us. When we look at what works, and we've looked at this data before, what works to recruit teachers of color in Minnesota, it really is about growing your own. And so we've been really working with Sincloud State in the last year to try to reboot and improve non-licensed staff to teacher residency program with SCSU, and those discussions are continuing and underway. Our Future Teacher Academy, led by our Learning and Teaching Department, has been growing beautifully in the last couple of years, and we're continuing to see really strong results from that program. We've been working to obtain the new hiring incentives that are coming through the state of Minnesota for teachers of color. The way that you access those monies is a little challenging. All of the districts in the state had a chance to kind of bid for the number of teachers that they thought they could recruit. And so a lot of the bigger districts said, we're going to get 10 and we're going to get 20 and there's only 30 spots available. And so we are on the waiting list. And when those districts find that they can't hire the students of color that they reserve spots for, those monies will become available and they'll be available to those other districts of us that are on that waiting list. So we're hopeful that we'll see some of that incentive money coming to our school district this year yet. And then, as I talked about earlier, I think that pipeline that we create, fueled by our administrative team, that is paying particular attention to the effort to recruit a diverse staff, has been really helping us. Moving forward, we continue to want to work with developing affinity groups for our staff of color. Some of that work has, I will be honest, has been upended a bit during these 2 years of COVID when we've just been chasing all of the other dynamics around the school district. I'm really excited for Ayan in joining us here this month at the school district, and particularly with her experience as a teacher. I think she's going to do some really important work for gathering up our teachers of color and making sure that we're listening carefully and attending to the needs that they have to be successful in our district. Well, we have been working on non-licensed career fairs. Again, career fairs haven't been what they typically are in these conditions, but we'll continue to leave that out there as a goal. The goal that was set by the Equity Achievement Committee a couple of years ago was that by the year 2023, we would move to 8% teachers of color. We're currently at 6.38% with 60 teachers of color across our district. So we'll continue to move toward that target. And then again, the Grow Your Own program, looking to have a more robust program that we can partner with St. Cloud State on. If you look at the percentage of our non-licensed staff at 18+%, that's the most diverse pool of folks that we'll find in this region. And they're right here and they're already working for us and committed to the education of our students. And so if we can find some pathways into that educational structure for them that will be meaningful and viable, I think that will be one of the best recruiting tools that we can have. So that's what I have for you this evening. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, Tracy. Anybody have any questions or comments? Al?
Thanks, Tracy. It was another good presentation. Great work, difficult work, and especially I believe in comparison to the community at large and other large employers in the district. And last year, when you presented this, similarly, it was impressive, but it was the first time you had really put it all together like this. And shortly after that, the Chamber of Commerce, the St. Cloud Chamber of Commerce, Therese Bonin came out and they were taking applications for the Diversity in Employment Awards. I think that's what it was called, or the Diversity in, oh dang it, I should have wrote that down. Whatever. They have and it was the award to be given to the corporation or the local employer who had shown that they had made great strides or taken great strides in employing individuals of color and in improving and increasing the diversity in their workforce. And I sat down and wrote a nice big long, filled out the application and wrote a nice big long thing and attached the PowerPoint and sent it along to Teresa, and I was just waiting to hear and waiting to hear and waiting to hear, and I never heard anything. Then I got a hold of Teresa. She said, well, we haven't, that committee hasn't met yet or something like that, but it's coming up. We're gonna meet, we're gonna have that award. And then later I got a hold of her again because I hadn't heard anything. And it was, the answer was that committee hasn't met and there isn't a lot of interest in the committee and it doesn't look like they're going to be meeting, but we're still going to have the award. And you had a great application and a great, that's a great presentation. And my belief in this is that this shouldn't be presented to us. This should be presented to the community. And go out and say to other employers, this is what you can do. We've done it. And things are getting better, not worse. And, you know, it's a good thing. We need to see this in other employers. But anyway, then at the very end, I think I called Teresa and nothing. And then now we got our new chamber person, Julie. And I contacted her and she said, oh yeah, I see that you have an application. That's a great application. But I don't know if this award is going to be given out or not. And it just got lost.
Yeah.
And it's a real disappointment to me because the Chamber of Commerce shouldn't have lost that. They went out, they asked for applications, they were going to give out this award. They should give out this award. And, you know, by golly, if we were the only people who had a story to tell and the only application that they received, then we should get it and they should showcase it. And I really think that it should be showcased, so I'll keep pushing,
Thank you, I agree.
but
Choose us.
I haven't gotten anywhere with it yet, but I'll keep trying. I've been a member of the chamber for like 30 years, so that's a lot of dues. They should respond with something.
It's a great story to tell. I always look forward to this because this is a proud moment to see this presentation and all the hard work. I realize that there's so much that goes into making this where it's at to support those numbers. Les?
I was wondering if there was any breakdown between American blacks and non-American blacks, because there is a difference.
Yeah, well, the reporting that we have comes out of our EEOC based on those federal categories, and I think we've had this discussion before with respect to students and other reporting that we have to do. And it's not broken down in that category, right? So an employee can choose to answer the EEOC reporting form under the categories that are provided by the federal government, and they don't break them down.
Go ahead.
We've been at this for a lot of years, and I've said before, I'm impressed this community has done an exceptional job of making sense out of the concept of diversity. And I think as I mentioned some time ago, we had a meeting of policymakers in Sincloud a long time ago, and that meeting was called by the mayor, and the mayor wanted to include people of color in the community, but there were 27 people, and there were no people of color that were technically policy, they weren't. And I said, don't do that. Left it. And when people saw that, we had that meeting in 2015. Again, there were 27 people, superintendent of schools, police chief, college presidents, significant policy. Today, if we had that meeting, of those 27 people, 27 categories, 13 of them would be people of color. 13. You got to understand, that is so outrageously positive. I'm sorry, my mic is on. I'll say it again. Of that 27 members of policymakers back in 2000, today, if we had that same meeting with the mayor's office, 13 of those people, of the 27, would be people of color. That includes a superintendent of schools, police chief, a director of public transportation, those and college presidents. So I think Al's really right about this. This is not a school district award because without the rest of the community, people wouldn't be here. The whole point that people were doing at that time was we're not trying to hire people of color. What we're trying to do is get people of color to look at our community and see if we can get them to apply for jobs so that we can look at them and talk to them. And what the mayor said at that time is that, if we get to look at enough people of color, we'll find people of color we can't do without. And some of the businesses said, we'll find people of color we don't want working for our competition. And that's why they hire them. So that's the difference between a community that's trying to diversify and a community that's saying, we need good people in our community so we can do good things. And when that transfers to education, and I think people need to understand, when students of color see people in their own community, very successful people, a superintendent of schools, teachers in the district, college presidents, they can say, I can do that. I can do that. And that is what is the whole process that moves us away from where we've been in this arena of racial diversity and that kind of stuff into what we call liberty, justice, opportunity for all people, because they believe it. And superintendent of schools walks through a school and a tech high school, and they see it, and the people look at them and they go, I can do that. And they can believe it, and they can see it, and they touch it, they can feel it, and they can have him scream at them from time to time, as some of my grandson has had him do. But that point is, I don't want to go on and on in this. Tracy, I want you to understand very specifically that you have driven this thing in the district. You've been the driver and the force behind this, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate what you do in this arena. This is phenomenal, and I think all of the staff and all of the people we have in our district make people feel welcome. That's the other part that's really important. So, yeah, we deserve this award. The community deserves the award, and they ought to do something about it. Well, no, they don't have to do anything about it. We know we're good. So, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm glad I got a chance to say this. I have not. This is something, if somebody had told me, if you had told me that I would be able to say this in 2010, what I said today, I would have laughed at people. So, thank you.
To your point, Dr. Green, I got to talk with one of our teachers of color this morning who shared in this district. I chose this district because of your student body and because I had a teacher that looked like me. And that's why I'm here today, because I want to be that teacher, right, that creates that pathway. And so I do think it's such important work for our students and for this community. And so I'm proud of that work. I've had wonderful partners in that work. So we've done that work together. But and at the same time, I'm also listening to our teachers of color that say that, we walk a difficult journey, and it's not the same journey that our white teachers walk. And so again, I'm really committed to making sure that not only do we create the opportunity for teachers to join our district, but we create the right conditions for them to thrive here. So I'll be looking forward to partnering with ION in that work as we move forward.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I was just going to say the other thing about this reality is that we have so many families that have chosen this district because of what this looks like. Yes, families of color, but also families who want white families like mine, who want their kids to be prepared for what the world looks like instead of just what your home looks like. So it's one of the, when people say bad things about this district, one of the first things I'll tell them is this. And they're like, no way. You have the same percentage as like Minneapolis, St. Paul. I'm like, yeah, we've worked really hard at that. So it's a success story. So thanks for all your work and everybody up there for all their work as well.
All right.
So it's one of those good feeling moments, and Tracy deserves, people on that screen deserve incredible credit, and we're talking about the community, and people need to recognize, but I need to make sure I say this out loud. As a board, you need to feel good about that. As a board, you need to understand that none of that could happen without the board support. Whether it's things, crazy ideas that HR might come up with in terms of how to recruit and retain, the bottom line is during this 9-10-year span, the board has been extremely gracious and supportive of all of these efforts. And so I know Al, because I remember last year when you were talking about nominating Tracy for the award, and totally agree. If and when, so I'm going to say when and then if she gets the award, the board needs to take pride in that, because the board had a lot to do with the policies and supporting for this to be able to take place. So I just want to make sure you guys don't, you get emails from all sides and many different things, and you don't get a whole bunch of accolades, but this is one that you should celebrate as a board.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, next up, we have Marketing and Perceptions presented tonight by Tammy Deland, Director of Community Education and Communications.
Thank you very much. I am happy to be here tonight with you and privileged to talk to you with a, you can't hear?
You have to turn it. I'll just get a little
Okay.
closer.
I can do it there. Usually not hearing me is not a problem. Not what people usually say. All right, how's that? Great. Well, thank you. I am very happy and privileged to be able to share with you tonight a marketing update on Sincloud area schools. So good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Jett, and members of the board. I thought that I would start tonight with just a brief overview of where we've been. And so that would predate my position and actually the creation of the communications department, when it's not surprising that there wasn't a marketing plan at all, or even a communications plan. And so as a result, individual school sites, for example, programs, departments, did not have any specific marketing that would distinguish them. And the branding that existed wasn't consistent, and therefore that created some confusion. Who or what represented the district. It wasn't always clear. A good example of this is the old website. I remember, for example, Community Ed's webpage was actually pink. And so it was very hard to tell that they were part of the school district. So that's kind of where we began. But then, if you recall, in 2014, the district and the community went about creating a mission statement and a strategic plan that provided guidance and established priorities, which included a priority on communications, and actually called out specifically in strategy number 2, priority 7, intentional branding and marketing. We as a district are going to improve the image through intentional branding and marketing, highlighting our strengths and our unique qualities in order to promote our diverse partnerships in the community. So what we've done, we started with a communication audit that was actually very thorough. We analyzed what we had done, what was working, and where our gaps were, what we hadn't done at all. Pre-COVID, so that would be a little over 2 years now, we established a marketing advisory committee that was comprised with many marketing experts in our community, both public and private. And Al sat on that committee as a business owner. We've also solicited stakeholder input in a number of different ways, through focus groups, through surveying, and at different times we've hired professional marketing consultants to help us when we had a specific purpose in mind. So to begin, we went to work on that improved image by creating marketing toolkits. Those logos and brands for each individual school. If you go to the website now and you pull down this school menu, you'll see that every school has a very distinctive logo. That happens to be Clearview Cougars, right there you can see. But as you look across all of those schools, those logos resemble each other, and more to the point, they very clearly are part of the district brand. Within the marketing toolkits, individual staff members can find what they need, the materials they need to market at their own school site level. There are posters, letterhead, postcards, flyers, all of the tools that they might need. In addition, in a more comprehensive view, we created a branding and style guidebook, which absolutely spells out, here are the fonts. Here's the style guide that we use in the district. On the right-hand side of that slide, you can see these are our official colors. Schools have official colors. The district has official colors. So that if we're publishing something, it all looks the same, no matter who the vendor is. And then, of course, our marketing efforts become very concentrated when we launch a campaign. And these are probably recognizable to you as the marketing campaigns that we normally kick off at the beginning of our staff kickoff. It's usually a 2-year marketing campaign, and it comprises many, many hours and many thoughtful materials and actions that accompany that. The 742 Proud was our first marketing campaign and is pretty recognizable here. And I thought that maybe it would be helpful for you to have an idea of what a marketing plan looks like. This is just a snapshot of one page of the 742 Proud campaign, but all of our marketing campaigns start with a goal. And with the 742 Proud campaign, that goal was to increase overall student enrollment and community support through elevating that 742 pride. And we learned about that pride when we did those focus groups. And we knew that that pride was there. So we wanted to elevate it and we wanted to highlight it. And that included students. That included families, that included staff members, and of course, our community partners. During a marketing campaign, when we're doing this plan, we want to make sure that we know who those audiences are, so we identify them, so we are inclusive. We also identify what strategies we want to use when we're marketing. And with the 742 Proud campaign, we were very specific that we wanted to use testimonials. We wanted to storytell so that we connected those audiences to the specific benefits of our district. And then we would go about identifying our delivery types and our platforms. So you probably will recognize some of these key messages that we identified. Some of them came straight out of the strategic plan. This was an example of kindergarten promotion, making that big step into kindergarten easier. And these were all testimonials of our family members, our staff members. We used audio testimonials on radio ads. And what you're seeing here are examples of our billboard campaign. The IM 742 marketing campaign was intentionally created to build upon the success of the 742 Proud campaign, but it also we wanted to focus with this campaign on a very personable, human way to illustrate the many faces of our district. And I'm going to play just a highlight here of that video. So that video did a great job of showing who we are and the values that we represent. This also was part of the I Am 742 campaign. These were Facebook ads, and this is a staff member who said, I am driven, confident, a lifelong learner, a student-focused tutor, organizer, a junior Rotarian. This student is a math whiz and a concert violinist. And here's a foster grandparent. This is a 742 dad, but he's also one of our preschool teachers and a Lego master. I think you can agree that was a great campaign for very up close and personal viewing of who we are. The 742 Be the Difference campaign actually rolled out of a targeted HR marketing campaign, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But with this campaign, what we want to focus on are the many ways that we make a difference for our students and for our 742 community. In the upper left-hand corner there, you'll see Mr. Olson. He, in this video, was illustrated making a difference being humorous every year. And he has done this for years. Mr. Olson, who is a Phi-Ed teacher, dresses up in a different Phi-Ed costume, and that's how he has his school picture taken. And there have been so many years of them now, he has a montage of them. And this video, this YouTube video, we also put on social media, and it got picked up, and there were actually television stations that were showing Mr. Olson and his years of costumes. 742 Be the Difference campaign was also a bridge over the spring of 2020. And so some of the marketing in this campaign was showing the extraordinary efforts of our staff during really extraordinary and difficult times. The 742 IT squad, I don't know if you remember that video, but that actually emphasized our tech integrationists who were making sure that every student in our district had a device in their hands and knew how to use it when we went into all distance learning. The video in the upper right-hand corner is Mike Payton, who is a Clearview custodian. And in his video, his Be the Difference video, he talks about the importance of making sure that his school is clean and sanitized and is feeling safe for the students and the staff. And then he admits that he occasionally dresses up as Cody the Cougar and meets the kids at the bus stop because that's a welcoming way to come to school. And that brings us to our current campaign. This year's campaign is 742 Together. And we are celebrating that we came back together in person, and we are happy and strong and united in this work we do during really challenging times. I know you can all agree that a really important part of marketing is telling our story. And we do this really well, but through a variety of channels. I know that you've all seen the videos, which are amazing in the amount of emotion and storytelling that they do. We also produce almost every single week a blog, which is featured on the website. And then, of course, we push that story out through our social media. And we also use our website as a marketing tool. And of course, mostly people think of the website as an informational warehouse, which it is. It's where we have information. You find out when events are happening and so forth. But we also use that website to market. We use our news stories in that way, and we use our gallery, our photos and our videos to tell stories. Also our publications, whether they're electronic or in hard copy. And we love what we call unearned media, which is when we use our media sources to help us market our school district, whether it's newspaper or radio station or even people who are local bloggers. I thought it might be fun to trace how a story sometimes adapts, evolves, and takes a life of its own. This is a story we did a couple of years ago called Dressing for Success. Carissa wrote it about Mr. Mathiasen at Lincoln Elementary School. And Mr. Mathiasen, if you don't know him, dresses up and makes a point of every Tuesday calling it Dress for Success Day. And he encourages all of his kids to literally put on the tie or the blazer or the dress shoes and feel the importance of coming to school and elevating the importance of that particular day. It was a great story. And we put it on our Facebook page. And from our Facebook page, someone called Boyd Hubert. And if you don't know who Boyd Hubert is, he's a reporter for KARE 11, and he's a great storyteller in and of himself. He has a series called Land of 10,000 Stories all across the state. He called and he said, I'd really like to interview this teacher. He came, he talked to Mr. Mathiasen, the kids, he did a wonderful story on his program, and that wasn't the end of it. There was so much attention and outpouring of goodwill to the Boyd Hubert story that KARE 11 then did a news story as a follow-up of the amazing donations we got from all across the state, and Lincoln actually ended up with things that were from across the country, ties, dress shirts. It was amazing. They were a little bit worried about storage, but very happy. Now, all our stories don't roll out that way. But I thought it would be a really good way of looking at these various channels, and that's how that outreach grows. I'll also take just a brief amount of time to do a then and now tracing our analytics. We're following what we do all of the time so that we know how to do better. These are a then and now for our social media. Facebook in 2014, which is right as I and the communication department were formed, if you will. Facebook it existed in this district, 1,600 followers. Some of these measurements are jargony. Engagement, I'll just define for you. What engagement means when you're talking about social media is any way that someone reacts to your post. So if they like it, or they retweet it, or they tag it, or they comment, all of those things make up that measurement called engagement. The other thing I want to point out is that 5.7% sounds kind of measly, I know, but you need to look at that small print so you see what the industry standard is. Good engagement on social media is anywhere between 1 and 5%. So even in 2014, we were doing a pretty good job in getting our followers to engage with us on Facebook. Now, in comparison, you'll see our trend now is pretty impressive. We have over 8,000 followers, and I can tell you they're almost all moms. We have over 8,000 followers, and that engagement isn't just great, which is measured at 5% plus, but it's outstanding, 8.3%. And what that means, of those 8,000 followers, we have a huge number of them who are engaging with us on a regular basis. Impressions, that term simply means the number of times your post is displayed or potentially seen. And so you can see the difference between 368,000 and over 2 million. Twitter engagement, we started with 359 followers, 1.8 engagement, and we've grown to 2,800. And again, that 4.4 engagement is considered great engagement. YouTube, of course, is the video challenge channel. We started this in 2014. We were using a different vendor platform prior to that. So it started off pretty slow. Also, you'll note that the measurements are different. What's important on YouTube is the average duration. How long is someone spending on our videos? And 3 minutes, 42 seconds is extremely, extremely good. But look at now, 2,300 followers, and our average duration that people are spending on a YouTube video on our channel is 6 minutes. That's amazing. Instagram, we started in 2016. And we have grown that to 1,800 followers, 4.7 engagement, again, great. One last snapshot. This is considered a sentiment score, and what it reflects is our news perception. So in other words, we use a company called Meltwater for this type of analytics. And so what they do is they create an algorithm for the number of times Sincloud Area School District, any one of our schools is named, or any of the keywords is mentioned in a news story, whether it's newspaper, radio, or again, even blogs. Anything above the line is positive sentiment with a story. Anything below the line is negative sentiment. You look at the comparison between 2015 and 2021, we were perceived pretty darn well last year. So that sums up how we started, what we've been doing. Last logical question is where we're going. I want to highlight a few things for you here. Number one, I think you may be aware of this, but we are in the process of redesigning the website, not scrapping the website and starting over, but redesigning with a very intentional purpose of trying to get it more as a marketing tool. Don't worry about how that looks. It's black and you can't really see. This is just like a screen template that we're actually live working on. But what I want you to pay attention to is this is going to be on the homepage of the website, and what we're looking to do is drive people to this section that tells them, well, this is why you want to choose 742. And then each of those categories is going to be a little story or maybe a video which tells them that unique benefit of our activities, of our AP programs, and so forth. We want the website to help us do that work. I also want to point out that target marketing is sometimes very dependent upon what time of year we're at. So for example, right now it's January and it's preschool registration and kindergarten enrollment, and right on the tails of that is middle level open houses. So we're in the process of that marketing as well as kindergarten kicks off. Language immersion, it often coincides, obviously, with kindergarten enrollment. But right now we have a targeted language immersion campaign. They just had a new storytelling video that was created for the immersion open houses in December. And the immersion guide was rewritten this year as well and is new on the website. You also might remember targeted marketing this fall was activities. When we were trying to get our kids to sign up, we did a targeted marketing then too. Also brand new, we have 2 language Facebook pages. You can read the Spanish 742 Facebook page or our Somali. And when I say new, I mean they're like 30 days old. And here we go, Tracy. This is the HR targeted marketing program that we began with the Discover the Difference, 742 difference, make a difference with 742, and be the 742 difference. This is very targeted to hiring and filling in those staff gaps. And right now, we're working with HR on a monthly marketing campaign for them. Finally, I'd just like to give you a little teaser. We are working with a consultant right now on a comprehensive marketing plan that I should be able to tell you more about in just a little bit. We're getting a proposal together. One last note, I'd just like to remind us that marketing actually belongs to all of us. It's not just a communications department solo act. Every time we're in the grocery store and we're telling the person in line what a great school and how much we love our school, that's marketing. Or we are at a concert at Lake George, or we are welcoming someone new to our neighborhood. Every time that we are sharing about the great things happening in our district, that is marketing. Or in the immortal words of our superintendent, when we share the story of why 742 is the place to be. And that's all I have for you tonight, but I would be remiss before I took questions If I didn't shout out the communications team, it is an outstanding, outstanding group of talented, skilled, hardworking people that all of this beautiful work would not be possible without. They're amazing. So I just had to shout that out. Shannon, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks. Al, I know that you were trying to jump in there.
My first question was back on the Facebook page. I tried to get your attention then.
Oh, sorry.
But do we do any boosting or paid
Yes.
exposure on?
Yes, we do. That's a really good question. And it goes to the algorithms. Facebook is notorious for changing its algorithms for getting its traffic, right? You know, its organic reach. And some time ago, the big change they made was that very thing. When Facebook first began, you could drive people to your site very easily by being clever or having these great photographs or whatever the case may be. Organic reach is basically, as you know, almost non-existent anymore. You almost have to pay. And so we do in a very targeted fashion. So for example, this month I have a budget that I assigned to Facebook advertising. Can I say that? Amy, can I say advertising? I have a budget that's small, but it's targeted for Facebook ads. There she is. I said advertising. Am I in trouble? And this month, it's for kindergarten enrollment. Those targeted Facebook ads, and so that pushes it.
Right. Facebook seems to be, you can get pretty good organic, likes you, but it's real difficult without paying for it to get outside that circle.
No, you're absolutely right.
Okay, so that was question number one. I think I wanted to make a comment. I applaud the consistency. That was probably the biggest factor missing. You can't build a brand without consistency. And the consistency in all of the materials is really good. The colorations, just when you see something, when you're even just scrolling through Facebook, when you see something from 742, you know it's 742 just because of the colors and that's how you create a brand. You get that instant awareness, and you don't even have to tell people it's 742. They just know it's 742 because of the consistency of the colorations and the style and the font and all of that. It's all important stuff, and it all goes into building those brands. So I congratulate the group on finally getting some consistency there, because that was totally missing. Every school had their own internet, had their own website platform, and they all looked different, and logos and colors, and there was no brand. And I'm not surprised to see those favorability numbers either, because as you build a brand, you get favorability whether you deserve. That sounds bad. Whether you deserve it or not. Sometimes you can make mistakes, but people still look at you favorably because they're favorable with the brand. So that brand carries you through your little missteps, and that's a real positive thing. The one area that I still say that we have opportunity is in those electronic signs. Just consistency, consistency in changing messages. A lot of times I'll see the same message on there over and over and over and over for months. The same graphic or whatever. And it seems to me that we should have some school specific. There should be rotations in there. Things that change weekly with, like, here's what's going on this week at our school. Might be a band concert Thursday night, 7 p.m., might be a choir concert, might be a football game, might be a whole bunch of different things. But just something to make it so that when I look at the sign, I'm it's localizing it to that, but then it's also branding. So a combination of the two, and changing and rotating consistently, and even through the summer. You know, some different message all the way through the summer, things going on in the district, things going on in the school. And some schools are better at changing their message boards than others. I think you know which ones are better, but some of them are really good at it, and some of them they just never change. So, and those are, I believe they're a real valuable piece of marketing. If you go out to buy billboard marketing, you pay a lot of money for that. And this is free billboard marketing. It's on some pretty busy streets, and there is a lot of traffic. The traffic is localized, and you actually have a pretty captive audience. You're getting parents of kids that go to those schools. And we're expanding over time the number of those billboards that we have throughout the community, so we're going to get better and better coverage throughout the community. So it's just an area that I always look at it and feel like it could use a little better consistency and branding and messaging. So I think that was it. I might think of something else. But overall, it's been a huge, huge change. It's night and day. It went from nothing to something really good. So very, very happy with it. Very proud.
Al? And so to piggyback what you just said, because Tammy's in charge of the communication department and from a district perspective, one of the things that we are discussing at the cabinet level, but not really at the cabinet level, I'm going to place it at the two individuals who are in charge of sites, is if I'm a business owner, I'm in charge of my brand. And what you just talked about is if I'm the lead principal in that building, that's my community. And there's different ways that we're discussing, or the two assistant superintendents are discussing in terms of how to evaluate that or make it part of the evaluation process for that administrative staff within that building. Here is a component. So Tammy might have many ideas to help them with that, but like you said, there are some buildings who are outstanding at it, and then some who that's not their virtuosity, and they need some assistance. I just wanted to say that conversation is being had with Tammy, the site leaders, and the two assistant superintendents.
And from experience, it can be the first year through something is always really difficult because you've got to come up with ideas. What are we going to put on there this week? What's going to go on there next week? You're thinking and thinking and thinking. But if you write it down and you just keep a weekly log of what went on there, your second time through, you can almost just hand it off to somebody and say, would you make sure these messages get put up on the board? Because it changes little from year to year. You have the same events, you have the same things, you just have to say, you know, from a schedule standpoint, that it's this Friday at 7 p.m. auditorium, stuff like that. And I don't think it's a bad idea either to cross market, like on the north billboard, it's not a bad thing to say, hey, it's the Tech choir concert this evening at Tech High School. If you can find a way to do it that it's not distracting from north, but to use it as a district. I kind of, when we've talked, Willie, I think I've kind of said that it should be about 50% school and 50% district. 50% branding and 50% school activity. And some of it can just be happy messages. But
Yeah, the brand is really localized. If I am traveling about the state, like in 2 weeks we'll be going to a MSBA conference, and people will ask, well, where do you work? And I'll say, well, District 742. And I'll get this blank stare. What's a District 742? Sincloud. Boom, the eyes light up, they know. Is there some way that we can do more matching of St. Cloud and 742, so that people understand besides just their little tiny local area? I know we've got St. Joe and we've got Clearwater and but St. Cloud is what is recognized when you get out of the area. Like, if there's some way we could brand it.
The, so the actual logo is St. Cloud Area School Spelled out. That's our legal name.
Right.
And we call that the icon logo. The 742 apple is attached. That's the whole logo, and this is all spelled out in the branding and style book. So sometimes only the icon logo is used, depending on what the purpose is. If the logo, including our name, is used, it is all of it, St. Cloud Area School District, because we have 9, you're right, we have 9 municipalities. So we want to be inclusive of all of the schools and the communities in our district. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. I'll give you an example. I'm going to be wearing this mask in 2 weeks down to the MSBA conference.
Good for you.
And people look
Want
at me
more
and they'll say,
stuff?
what is a St. Cloud together? Or what is a 742 together? If I can't say somewhere in there St. Cloud, they won't have a clue. I mean, 742 together does not go beyond our locality. Do you kind of understand what I'm getting at? Somehow we gotta get the word St. Cloud in there to zoom people in. Oh, he's from Willie Jett's district.
I don't know about that, but to pipe in on that, being that you used Willie Jett or the Elvis, Elvis has left the building, how we did that earlier. The one thing is I've been in, just adding to that conversation, Scott, I've been in more than a few districts. And so I could sit there, we're in St. Cloud, so I would ask you, what is Anoka Hennepin's district number?
No idea.
Okay, I do, 11. What is Osseo Schools?
279.
Uh-oh, we have a graduate, 279. There's 2 of them here. Okay, and the reason I'm saying that is from a state level, most people in the state go by your area. So they'll say, oh, that's St. Cloud Area Schools, or oh, that's Anoka Hennepin, or oh, that's St. Paul Public Schools. District number 1, that's Minneapolis, I believe. And so that's when you'll hear the numbers, but if you are within the community, or if you were close, you know the number. So when somebody says District 196, I know that that's Apple Valley, Egan, those folks know that, and you will see masks with them. But for some of us, I can tell you what 196 is because I just know that one. And so I'm just saying that, Scott, because you will see that, and I think when you're at the MSBA, you're going to see even more of that. When I'm at superintendent's conference meetings and whatever, you see everybody with their gear and their number, but I can't tell you what that number is, but I can tell you by the face, or I can tell, well, okay, that associates with Hopkins. And so that's just one of those moments. And I'm hearing you say, can we tie in some of our marketing to expand it? That's the way I'm taking what you're saying.
Yes,
To expand it, not just so that all of Greater St. Cloud knows that we're talking about 742, because everybody, I believe, or most in central Minnesota, if you say 742, folks know what that is. There used to be jingles on the radio, there's signs, there's all these different things that we're doing. But I believe what you're saying is, and is there a way, as we are ever improving, to market us and have a greater scope?
Yes.
That's the way I proceeded. Okay.
And Al wants to jump in here, and then Les.
Yeah, and Willie, I know I talked about that with you years ago, just it's very difficult to brand a number. But I think it's, part of it is in this area, we are known as District 742. And when there's an article in the Times, it's District 742 school officials. when there's an article in the Times, it's not District 748 school officials, it's Sartell School District officials. And it's Sauk Rapids School District officials. It's not, I don't know how we got branded as a number, but we did get branded as a number. And Scott's right, when you're outside of this area, it's just a number. When you go to MSBA stuff and they ask you what district you're from, you can't stand up and say 742. You have to say St. Cloud. So there is something to that on a scale outside of the boundaries of our district that we have to be careful of, and that's that when we're outside those boundaries, that we're not branding ourselves as a number, because it's unknown.
One of the things I think that happens, and I'm not a marketing professional, but I think one of the things that will happen, if you're outside the area and you say you're from District 742 because you've done something important, is why you're saying, why people ask you where you're from, then you get to say St. Cloud. I mean, it's part of a process of you know, if you get people's interest, where's 742? I mean, asking the question means that you've got their interest and they want to know about it. For years, and maybe Zach might know this, but I heard the number 916 for 12 years. I worked in the prison system, and I had, it's 916. It was, people were going to 916. It was inmates going to 916 for vocational kinds of training and things like that. I said, what is 916? You know, and it was the number of the school district in White Bear Lake, or where was it? Eastside, yeah. So it was, but we heard it, it was the number they, you know, it was like an acronym. Instead of saying St. Cloud School District, it's District 742. So be happy that people want to know, don't know, and ask you. Because that's the, I mean, the marketing, it seems to me, if you've done something worth somebody asking where you're from, then you have an opportunity to engage and do whatever. So, but I see the point, but, you know, we should be happy for the things that are thrown in our lap, like the number that got us there, and also that we are doing good enough things that people are going to ask us, where is that district? So, whatever. I like to babble once in a while.
I don't have much to say except for your social media growth is so impressive. Like the impressions from 2014 to now, I mean, people pay, whatever your budget is now, people pay a lot more than that to even get a little slice of that. So I know it's been more than just, I know it's been a whole slew of things, because it used to be a big concern of mine with what was being said in the comment section as well on Facebook. And that's a huge change that I've noticed, that people are more willing to go to bat for 742. If someone tries to say something negative, there'll be tons of parents being like, oh, no, you didn't. Like now there's a lot of pride in the district to the point where we won't take that anymore, which is beautiful. That's a big change in just the number of years I've even been on the school board. So yeah, impressive numbers. That's, people get paid millions of dollars to figure out numbers like that. So ask for a raise.
Quick.
Okay, are we good? Thank you, Tammy, for all your hard work. Okay, next up, we have the 2022 Summer Projects Update presented by Amy Scallerud, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services.
It's not an action item, so it's just an update. But we'll make sure to get that in for the public's reference. Okay, so we are going to quickly talk about the projects planned for summer 2022, which I know seems like a really far way into the future, especially given the weather outside. But we want to make sure that we have the board aware of what's going on, because we know any large projects require bids. And so we want to make sure that the board and the public are aware of what we have planned, so when those call for bids come to the board for approval, there's no surprises, and everyone knows kind of what's on the agenda for the summer. So the first major project that we have going on this summer is the Katherine Johnson Education Center. That project is actually already underway. Those bids were approved in September, and construction is currently taking place in one portion of the building, while we have programming in another portion of the building. And then when that section gets finished, the programming will move, and we'll start construction on the part of the building that's currently occupied with students. So that project will wrap up this summer. Excuse me. We'll wrap up this summer, and we will be relocating the rest of the programs and staff as well over the summer, so that it's running at full capacity starting with the fall. The next project that's on the schedule for this summer shouldn't be a surprise to board members. This is a project that the board previously approved in February in terms of an allocation of funds coming from the remaining bond funds. Clearview controlled entrance. Clearview is the last elementary school that doesn't have a controlled entrance, so this completes that commitment that the district made a number of years ago to complete those projects. The initial budget that was authorized in the bond fund allocation was $500,000. Currently, just based on the drastic increases in the construction market as a result of COVID, we're looking at that estimate being closer to $600,000. However, there were other projects within those board-approved projects at that time that have come in under budget, and so we have money within the total amount that the board had authorized to cover that increase, and Finance Committee has reviewed that information as well. As far as the project itself, we'll look a little bit at the layout of what's proposed and where that construction will be occurring. So this is a map of a portion of the building. Just to kind of get your bearings, the bottom portion aligns with the front of the school. So that main drop-off that's adjacent to the county highway there. So that kind of gray area right here in the middle is that main entrance, that main vestibule. The areas that are highlighted in gray are the areas where construction will be taking place. This portion up here is where the office is currently located. So obviously the office will be moving to the other gray area adjacent to the entry. And then the existing office will be converted so that it's more functional space. And we'll flip to the next slide and look kind of more at each of those two spaces and what that proposed work looks like. So the first is the actual office area. So again, you see the vestibule, front door area here. And then these are the two existing classrooms. Currently, those are traditional classroom spaces that will be converted to the office space. So the first portion of the classroom is kind of what you would consider the primary actual office space with the clerical staff and principal conference room, principal's office. And then the remainder of the space, the second classroom, the majority of that will be the nurse's office, which is also currently located in that old office space, and then a workroom. And then this is the other area that will be under construction. The drawing on the left is what that space is currently configured as the office. So this is currently the office with the principal's office, and then this is currently the nurse's area, kind of all in here. And the major part of construction, there's not a lot going on in this space, but what the primary work that needs to be done is to enclose this area here. This is currently open, just with a kind of roll-down gate and mailboxes. It's not an actual space that you can close off and really lock down and have noise protection and privacy and whatnot. So that wall we'll be constructing a wall there to close that into an actual classroom type of space, and that will become their room for their behavioral resource specialist, which is the focused room. And then as far as other major projects, the two sites that we just talked about, Clearview and Katherine Johnson Education Center, will also have parking lot projects going on. It's much easier to do parking lot projects at schools that are already not accessible or closed down because of other construction, just in terms of not having to create that inconvenience twice. So that's the reasoning for that. Both of those are coming from LTFM funding. And then Talahi HVAC project is probably the single largest project that we will have going on this summer. Again, this should not be a surprise. This was talked about as part of the ESSER 3 spending plan and was included in the application. MDE has approved the use of those funds for this project. That total project cost is estimated at approximately $5 million. And so that will be happening this summer. We'll see those likely coming to the board to approve those bids at the next meeting. We want to make sure that we're bidding early, just knowing that we have pretty long lead times on some equipment, and just knowing what the pricing is out there right now. Also, just to note on the HVAC project, we do still need to do HVAC projects at Discovery and Oak Hill. They're very similar systems and layouts as Talahi, so those are also estimated at about $5 million each. Those are tentatively scheduled for the summer of 2023, utilizing bonding within LTFM for that. And so that will be coming forward at a later date as far as approval and more information about that. But wanted to make sure to mention that those buildings haven't been forgotten. They're just scheduled for the following year. And part of that is just about the inability to take 4 of our buildings out of commission all in one summer. So if we already have Talahi and Clearview not available for Kids Stop and summer school and other summer needs, we can't take Oak Hill and Discovery at the same time. So that's why those have been staggered. And then the last project that's scheduled is the North Canopy replacement. This is a project that we had intended to do last summer. We did do the similar project at South. The intention was to do both. However, when we got the quotes for that, the South project was under the statutory bid threshold, but the North quotes came in quite a bit over that. And so to not be violating statute, the decision and the recommendation of Finance Committee was to table that project until we could do a proper bid to make sure we were compliant with statute. So that project will be coming forward for this summer as well. So those are the only really significant large projects that would require bids. Obviously, we have a lot of small LTFM projects, painting, casework, bathroom projects, but nothing that would exceed that $175,000 threshold. So this is what you'll be seeing coming forward. Again, our goal is to have all of these projects brought to the board for call for bids by no later than February, just to make sure that we're taking advantage of the best pricing possible. Are there any questions?
Do we have any of the ESSER money left? At one time, we were thinking of throwing a lot of ESSER money at redoing Apollo, and then we decided to spread it out. Is there any of that left?
Just come closer.
And I don't have the full ESSER plan in front of me, but if you recall from what we brought to the board, a very small portion of the ESSER plan was planned for construction, and a lot of that is in accordance with MDE and the parameters they've set. They're very particular about how much of those funds aren't used to directly support instruction and lost instructional time. So that's why we only have the one HVAC project as part of that budget, just based on recommendation from MDE and what they were likely to approve.
Okay, so most of that money was for,
Correct. This is the only portion of the ESSER. This project is the for construction.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? All right, thank you, Amy. Okay, next up, we have proposed revised board policy 504, student dress and appearance. This is the second reading presented by Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education.
Thank you, Chair Haas. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Jett. Tonight, we are completing the second policy 504, which is student dress and appearance. And thank you, Dr. Rivard, for pulling that up. We are reviewing, I'm just going to do a quick summary of the conversation that we had last time we met, because it was in December, and I know that feels like it was a while ago. We are reviewing this policy ahead of schedule based on feedback from our secondary staff. In November, we offered a survey to all licensed staff, asking them to identify the challenges and celebrations of the school year to date. Over 800 teachers responded to the survey. Building leadership teams, which are made up of school staff and building administrators, then reviewed their individual school results while district administration reviewed the entirety. And those leadership teams identified the top challenges and celebrations for their school. They then created recommendations for each of their challenges. For each of our secondary schools, staff identified the challenge of constantly addressing the prohibition on head coverings, primarily hats and hoods. Their recommendation was to allow hats and hoods to be worn in our schools, provided the head covering meets all other aspects of our dress code and code of conduct and are not disruptive to the educational environment. Based on those recommendations from our secondary schools, it came to cabinet, and we agreed to bring it forward ahead of schedule to the board. And you will see here the only change that we are recommending to 504 is the removal of letter D, which is, of course, that prohibition on headgear. I welcome any questions or comments.
Al, go ahead.
So, survey that went out to teachers, and I hate to do this, but on the second reading, I'm going to bring it up because after the first reading, I got a lot of pushback from a lot of different people. And we actually just got a letter here from a teacher right before the meeting, or earlier this afternoon it came through. And the question from this particular teacher is, they feel that it's going to be much more disruptive to have hats and hoods, and the kids are going to be able to wear earbuds because they have no way of controlling it when their hoods are up. They can't see what they're wearing in their ears. And the concern is that they're going to have a problem with that and kids aren't going to be paying attention. The feedback that I've gotten from members of the community, and I went to a thing downtown a few weeks ago and was approached by probably 8-9 different people. And they all had the same comments about it, that we're giving in. We're giving in to the students. We can't control it, so we're throwing in the towel and saying, go ahead and wear your hats and hoods. And they feel that we are abandoning a long-held tradition in which hats and hoods aren't allowed in schools. And so I'm just wondering, the funny thing is, I don't really have an opinion on it. That's I don't really care if the teachers want it. I'm fine with it. But how the feedback that you gave there is a little bit muddled up in that the teachers were surveyed and then it went to leadership teams and the leadership teams presented the information back to you. And I'm wondering, do we have any idea district-wide, how many teachers said, yes, this is a great idea, and no, and how many said, no, this is a bad idea? What would happen if we went out with one question and said, do you think that the board should be approving, or are you in favor of the board approving? Would that come back yes overwhelmingly, or would that come back no overwhelmingly? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. And so I have some concerns.
That question is in my head too. Les, do you want to jump in? Lori Putnam was going to, I think, answer that or address it, but.
Okay. So thank you for asking those questions. Beginning with the question about process, we weren't particularly looking for anything. We just wanted to know what's making your life hard and what's making your life easy right now. And the feedback was, of the folks who responded, right, we're tired of asking kids to take their hoods down and their hats off, and it starts a hard relationship, right? That's a hard way to start your day. And so the leadership teams are actually, those are teachers. So there's the administrator, the principal leads it, but it's one department head typically, but not always, but one department member from every department. And then that person goes and talks with leadership team. So that's actually how we get teacher voice. That's the decision-making body for the school, or the recommendation body, depending on the method of decision-making. So this is organic staff feedback. Will everybody agree? No. I think it's similar to when we changed, the dress code has evolved over time, right? And dress codes do that, right? Had we gone out and surveyed everybody and said, do you think girls' bra straps should be able to be shown, or is that distracting in the classroom? We might have been surprised that there might have been some people who are like, yeah, that's distracting. We can't change our dress code because of that, right? So I think that the fact that dress codes change as times change, it doesn't always sit well, and I understand that. Again, I'm not bringing forward the policy because I thought this was a great idea. Like, I think it's a fine idea, right? I think I've been in those schools every morning, like, please take your hood down. Hey, have a great day, glad you're here. Please take your hood down, right? And for what, right? And so I do want to address also that earbud question. I think like there are numerous kinds of distractions, and am I dismissing or minimizing that concern? Absolutely not. But I do think that is a classroom management issue. I think that I could have earbuds in. I think it's possible Shannon has had them in, and we would never know. I'm joking, Shannon. Girls can wear them under hijabs, right? There are boys with long hair, right? There are many ways to hide that kind of distraction. I could tune you out entirely just by drawing, right? So do I understand that? Of course. And I think that our administrators will gladly work with our staff who have that concern to partner with them in addressing that classroom management. I'm trying to think what I was thinking there are three things you said, Al. Tradition, I think that, thank you, Natalie, I appreciate that. And again, I think that goes back to change in over time, right? I know that, it certainly our families still have choice, right? They can still say, you know what, this is a value that we hold as a family. We value that you don't show your midriff, and we value that you take your hat off when you walk in the door, right? So it's not like, if that's important to families, we would never ask their kid to do something contrary. And we still have that note in the policy that says our administrators have the right to require specific or prohibit specific headwear depending on the circumstance and the event. So I do think there's still some space for honoring that tradition of removing your hat. Perhaps, when we may say when you're at graduation, we're not going to wear hats, or any sort of ceremonial event. So I think that there is some space to manage that.
Go ahead.
Is there a process or procedure the policy for the balance of the school year
Say more, Al.
and test it
test
as
it
a
out?
test to see how it goes and then get feedback from teachers to say, yes, it was good or no, it was bad before we would go in and change the policy?
Yes, that's
I
the
don't know
beauty
how
of
we
this
would
board
do
is that
but
you get to do that. I'll gladly bring, if you decide that you would like to amend the policy to remove D, with the expectation or directive to me to get feedback and bring it back to you in whatever set period of time you wish, I'd be glad to bring 504 back for another first reading.
yeah, I'm wondering if we have to do that or could we suspend a policy, temporarily suspend a policy through July 1st?
I have no
Point in
expertise in
time,
that
we would
area.
review it, or it would go back into
Lily
place
says
unless
yes.
we would amend it. So then it would be a proactive, you'd have to come back in July with another first reading, second reading in July. Well, first reading in July, second reading August, third reading August, it would be before the school year.
So
Would that be a,
we would be just suspending D of the
yeah,
policy 504?
we'd suspend D for the balance of the school year.
Sure.
And then get feedback or gather feedback towards the end of the school year.
Happily.
Just so that we don't change it and have some major issues arise and then have to go back and go through the process again. I don't, tell me if I'm nuts, Willie.
To suspend, would that have to be done during a board meeting? I don't think we can do it through a work session, can we?
No.
I would agree, yeah.
No, we can't.
Yeah.
Well, we weren't gonna approve it till the next one anyway, so.
So instead of coming, the proposal sort of is, instead of coming for a third reading, we would,
I'm looking at Tracy and she's looking at me.
Great.
Tracy, is that something that can be done or?
Yeah, I think we could certainly craft some language in that section that would serve that purpose.
And it's up to the board, I don't.
Les, go ahead.
Just to take a kind of a different, I don't know if it's different or not. One of the problems that kids will have, that I've had with the policy, because I have a teacher in my home who was at Tech, is inconsistent application, which is very, very distracting for students. Because if you're not used to, if a group of students historically wears hats as a whatever, and there's no hats allowed, then that student group is kind of selected out. If it's not consistently applied, it's a problem, and if it's consistently applied, if we make too big a deal out of it, it's a problem. I would wonder, as I listen to Tammy and the marketing, there's a reason why a person with some fetching up, as my grandmother used to call it, takes off their hat when they come into a building, or takes off their hat when they come into church or something like that. It's a custom, it's a tradition. The concept of no earbuds does sort of require that we're able to see people's ears. And then the other side of it is if kids don't want to pay attention, they're not going to pay attention. And so maybe the campaign ought to be, for your future, here's some things that we would like you to learn in school. One is, when you come into a school, you should take your hat off. You shouldn't wear a hoodie unless you're cold, and we'll turn up the heat for you or something like that. And you should pay attention in class and those kind of things. One of the things I noticed, if you go out west or different parts of even Minnesota, because I used to wear one, if you wear a cowboy hat, guys who wear cowboy hats eat with them on. I mean, you see them in restaurants and everywhere with these hats on, because it's just that special kind of hat. So what we need to ask ourselves is what impact does it have on academic learning, social emotional learning, to either say, have to tell a kid 3 times a day, 4 times a day, take your hat off, My wife actually was called racist because what happened is that the young men were walking down the hall with the hats on, they were black, and she said, "Take your hat off." And they took their hat off, turned the corner, my wife followed them, and they laughed and put their hat back on, and she stopped them and took them to the office. They go to the office. Now, and so she got called racist, and because it was, I mean, and do we need to have all that stuff? And I guess I don't know where I go with this, is that, how do we teach kids to pay attention in class? How do we teach them to be respectful? At the term, when we do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, I mean, I've watched some rather significant brawls start out if people don't remove their headgear at certain places. People get upset about the way people respond to these things. I look around the room, and because I know it offends some people, that if people don't take their hat off, I will wait until they do. So there's a lot of things about this that we maybe should focus on. Let's focus on whether or not we can consistently apply it so that we make sure everybody gets applied. And for what purpose do we say you can't have your hat on in school? And maybe the marketing thing of saying you want to get a decent job. You walk into a bank to get a job for an interview with a hoodie on, and you're going to have a tough time. So, well, I'll let it go with that. So, and I'm not,
Sorry, I don't know if you're advocating for.
Oh, actually, I'm
Advocating for
advocating
changing
for, my advocacy is, I really am tired of trying to teach adult children to have some sense, and although, when a high school student doesn't understand the concept of and I get that, but maybe just trying to explain to people why the hats I'm speaking in favor of it. At some point, if you haven't got sense enough to figure out your life by now, that your hat's not going to make the difference, but whether or not I make you do your homework might. So,
And the policy applies to all levels, so it apply to grade school as well as senior high.
grade school is a lot easier to
Yeah.
intimidate. I say that in jest, by the way. They see adults differently than high school kids do.
Well, it's not one that I'm going to go to. It's not one that I'm going to fight till the end. I'm not
Right.
fighting. I'm not fighting. I'm just saying that that's one way that we could
Yeah.
delay or.
Yeah.
I'm
It's a good
surprised.
point.
I'm surprised at the amount of pushback
Oh, yeah.
on this particular issue, because normally I don't get any feedback, and this one I've had a ton of people come up, and so that's been a concern of mine.
This is an American tradition for 500 years, for years. Gentlemen remove their hats when they walk into places, but ladies don't. Ladies wear hats in church hats, but if you walk into a church and don't take your hat off, at least in the churches I go to, the Reverend's liable to have a conversation with you from his position of whatever. So, I don't know. It's not giving in, by the way. That's the
Yeah.
only point I think. Giving in is not a place I want to stand when it comes to education. What educational value will it have? And I'm going on and on. I'm sorry. Let me just stop. But I'll support whatever we want to do, I think is. So.
Natalie?
I love the way that this came up. I love that we're hearing from teachers. And the thing I want to do in my life is make teachers' lives easier. And so it's a really interesting point that Al made, I think, by doing a test run and then getting feedback again from teachers, because it's teachers that said yes and it's teachers that are saying no. So the only way we could see if it actually works is to try it out. The other thing that we haven't touched on, and one of the other issues I've talked about with parents, is do-rags as well. And that has been a fight sometimes at Apollo, because that's not allowed either. And so then it's the argument there from parents is that's a cultural thing. And so, you know, I think it's more than just hats and hoods, but it's, you know, it was hijabs and that was for religious reasons. But then some parents say as well that do-rags is for cultural reasons. So there's just so many different levels to it that it seems like, why don't we just try it and see if it works? I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? Then we go back on it. I mean, I don't know, like, this is the real world. You try it and see if it works. When it doesn't work, you just say, no, for mind.
My question would be, are you advocating to suspend it till the end of the school year and then review it? Or are you advocating to change it and then if we have to, come back and change?
I would be fine with either way. If either way takes 3 readings, then I guess I would just go the full force of it and then circle back to it. But I just want to try it out, whatever is the right way to do that. In this, that values the teacher opinions on both sides, and values as well student opinions on both sides of it as well. But I would say for what Les said is exactly what my boys said, that in X teacher's classroom, I can put my hood up. And in Y's teacher's classroom, no way, I would never even dream of doing that. And so it's based on what hallway you're walking in at Apollo as to who is going to actually, you know, take the time or have that be their big rock that they're going to put up for that day. So yeah, the consistency is also an issue.
I think the idea of suspending it is giving the teachers respect to say, we value your input and that we're temporarily doing this because what we want to do is come wrap around and make sure that you like this, and then we'll move it forward. But this is important to us as your perspective of, do you like the change?
And I was going to say suspending it forces us to look at it again. Whereas changing it, it can just disappear into the sunset.
Scott?
Yeah, we sort of started this thing out on an emergency basis for that you wanted to get it done right away. What was the reason for the emergency?
Thank you. We took action on all of the challenges that came forward to us. So there were, and it was in my last school's update, our last school's update. So one of the requests was more that staff brought forward was the pressure of having all of the Wednesday time, which is the staff time, booked. So we made adjustments to the staff time. So there was nothing that came through as a challenge that we did not respond to. So this was urgent only in that we were trying to be responsive to our team.
As an employer, there dress codes, uniform policies. There's a very large employer in this area that it used to be their policy that you couldn't have a unnatural hair color to be employed there. You couldn't have purple hair or blue hair to get a job there. And there were other regulations too, maybe like tattoos exposed or something like that. I believe those rules have gone away. I don't think they gave in. I think they're just adapting to the community that we live in. And so I don't see this as we're giving in. I think we just maybe live in a community where if my son's friend were to walk into the house with a baseball cap, I wouldn't see that as a sign of being disrespectful. I think that impression of what that means, it doesn't have the same meaning anymore. We should, of course, always treat people, if something is disrespectful to them, we should be mindful of that where we are. So rules in one place, you go somewhere and how your actions have to change depending on where you're at. But I wouldn't see it as a student walking into a classroom and not removing their hat. I wouldn't see that as a sign of disrespect to their teacher or their learning environment or their students in there. That's just me, though. So I don't see this as backing down. I see this as adjusting to the times that we live in and not imposing something of the past. Zach, love to hear from you.
Okay. I'm gonna go down the middle here with, I can be very formal, as you can see here, right? But I also have my baggy jeans and Nirvana shirts and hats I like to wear. And there's always the theme of dressing for the job you want. But if you dress like an astronaut to school, people might look at you funny. You're all gonna be judged no matter what you do. Forcing, and I don't like the idea of kids wearing hoods and hats in school. They need to get more lights in their eyes. I'm not kidding. That's what it's about. We want them to be present. But when we make it the rule, we give them something to defy. And they will grasp onto that because don't you dare make me do X, Y, and Z, so whatever. Now our teachers are put up with that fight and they can't do it anymore. Nobody's going to win that. So I think what Natalie said there is, what's the worst thing that happened is it gets worse, and then we can come back with the policy and put up this fight again. But if you disarm that which they're rebelling against, in some of these cases, not all, but in some, right? Oh boy, they're not thinking about that anymore. So it's just part of why I support this change. And as it fits with the theme of just meeting kids where they're at, right? We have to. And otherwise, and hopefully we can model, hey, dress for the job you want. Just can't force them to do it.
Natalie?
I just want to echo what Lori said a while ago about how if that's the first interaction that our students have with a teacher, as they walk in the door, hoods off, hat off, that concerns me. And that is what happens because you're coming in from outside and I've tried to instill in my kids, like the way you talk in the morning, the way you come into school in the morning, is how your day will start and how your day will probably be. So when my 17-year-old started to drive the kids to school in the morning, I'm like, you have to be positive when you're letting Milo out at North and be like, have a great day, make it a great day, instead of like, get out of here. So, how can there's so much hardship in the world and in our community, and if we can just eliminate one hardship when our students walk in the door, again, why not?
The only thing I would add, and not being at the secondary, would be, I've been here before we had leadership teams, to Al's point, and the fact that these ideas have gone through our leadership teams, and what Dr. Putnam was talking about, is very meaningful. Those leadership teams are represented by a very vocal group of teacher leaders within the building who will sit and talk about these issues, not just for a few minutes, but went over these ideas that were coming through before they were brought forward to our building administrators. So there's a lot of people who are feeling very strongly about this is not an issue that we're wanting to take on right now at the secondary level.
So it sounds to me like we're all on board with this change, and then the question is, are we moving it forward as third reading as is presented prior to our discussion, or are we adding some wording that we're suspending it and going to reevaluate prior to the next school year? I guess, is that where we're sitting at? Les?
I'm at letting it go through to third reading. If something comes up between then and now and then that really says we had to do it a different way, then I think we could do it then. Huh? I'm sorry. Well, I mean, if you feel strongly, if anybody feels strongly about it, then we could do something at that time, move it off the consent agenda and to an action item, which then people could vote on it if need be. So, you know, and I'm,
That would be next week, or 2 weeks.
Yep.
But I guess the question is, the other way, the two ways of doing it are to move it forward as a third reading and change the policy, or suspend the policy through the balance of the year and then review it and make the decision whether we want to change it or not based on how everything went.
yeah, I get that, and I don't understand why we would do that, suspend the policy. We just, because we can, if we delete the policy and it's a problem, they'll bring it back to us, I assume. If it becomes a problem, I guess we'll hear from the leadership teams again. I'll yield to.
Yeah, can we let,
Go ahead.
So my comment to all of it, and it's a hearty discussion, and every point is valid, and the leadership from the teachers, they brought it to the forefront and trying to be responsive to their thoughts. If you're asking me what I would do, Al, the way you said it, there's two ways. The one is to put it through as a policy right now, and the other is, I don't want to use the word suspend because suspend to me, I'm getting into discipline. So what I'm really hearing you say is, can we do it and evaluate it later, okay, at the end of third try or whatever? My recommendation, if we're going to go there, is to do that, okay? And so as a building principal, I would be sitting there saying, okay, folks, as teachers, this is what our leadership team brought to us. The district now gave us the ability to do this. And then at the end of the year, or at the beginning of third trimester, or whatever date timing that we're going to do, we're going to evaluate it again. And now the board, we're going to ask you, and now the board is going to potentially make that policy at that moment. That's how I would recommend it if you're asking Elvis for his thought process one more time.
He's not using that word.
That, but not that word.
Correct.
Okay.
Postpone, whatever. But I agree with that, Willie, and the reason that I agree with that is because it causes a review of the policy versus something else causing a review of the policy. And we might review it after 90 days or after whatever, it's going to be 100 days, whatever it is till the end of the school year. We may review it and say it was great, nothing happened, the teachers found it was better. We'll just change it. Then it's set in stone. But I think that some way of going about it, so I would say yes for the board to be able to give permission. And I don't know if we need to do that through a vote or if we can do that through a nod of heads and move it quicker. Some of them, I'm getting feedback in my email from the one here today was a teacher. And there was another one earlier that was a teacher. And then when I was out in public, I got from both two teachers and other members of the public.
Oh, yes, we do, because they talk to us. We're always the winners because they talk to us.
I think the other thing is Tracy said that she can give you Tracy had the lingo to be able to give the heads up or the thumbs up or the ability for us to be able to do this.
Does it have to be done through a vote of the board, or does it at a meeting, or can it be done at the work session?
Tracy, I see you.
say we modify the language of that section with the expiration date and the review set, and then pass it on the third reading with that language included.
So it would be the next meeting.
So is this going to an action item rather than a consent agenda for third reading?
No.
No. Where is it headed? Guess I'm confused. Les, go ahead.
If there's a major change, it probably shouldn't just go to third agenda, what do you call it, the consent agenda. Ought to be I don't know. If you pull it off the consent agenda, do we have to vote on it?
Yes.
Yes.
And, okay, by vote, yeah, we vote on it no matter what. I think if there's that kind of a major change, we ought to look at it, and then.
That's
fine,
why I
too.
was saying was
that's
an
fine. Not a
action
big deal.
item
It's
rather
just-
than a consent agenda. It's coming forward as a third reading. Is it going consent? Correct? It's coming forward as a third reading. Is it going consent or is it going action?
I'm thinking it should be action because it
I
will
think
have
so,
a
too.
drastic change. in
Okay.
the-
Yeah.
That's fine too.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we're all happy and it's quick,
Oh,
but
I
if we
will
could
be.
just.
Sure. I will be.
Because we've thoroughly discussed it. We just would like to see it before we vote.
By the way, this is not a little issue, so, I mean, this is something that's been going on for years, for 25 years, so the amount of discussion is relevant to, or is commensurate with how big the issue is to some kids.
We won't be the last district discussing this.
Right.
You're going to see more of this.
Well, there's been a bunch. Yeah.
Okay, we're good? Oh, moving along. Last item of the night, schools update presented tonight by Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, and Dr. Mike Rivard, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education.
Good evening, Chair Hawes and members of the board and Superintendent Jett. This evening, Dr. Putnam and I would like to go through and update you on our school updates for the preschools and our elementary schools and our secondary schools. So at our preschools, our students are learning this year a lot about active play. Above, we see some of our little ones who are learning about and playing together at Core Review. Our two pictures to the left show our children going through the many skills of planning a pizza shop. The children learn new social skills by becoming servers themselves. They enjoy taking orders. They get to bake pizzas and then deliver the pizzas to their customers who just can't wait to eat it from them. If you look closely to the pictures on the right side, you see our preschools learning how to paint. This is a special painting activity. They are learning how to paint using magnetic rolling balls and a magnetic wand to create masterpieces of art, and also learn the fundamentals of magnets and the magnetic pull of what happens around the earth. So this is really a fun way to paint and to learn about science as 4-year-olds. I talked a little bit in our written school update last month about our equity department bringing in a field trip for 5 of our elementary schools. Lacey Locken, which she's been here with us before many times, is our supervisor of American Indian and Equity Programming, and she ensured that elementary schools were able to experience the real-life teepee with information shared from Jim Knutson, who is an Ojibwe American Indian and a Marine Corps veteran. The students were able to spend time in the teepee, learn about life for a family who called it their home, and then saw about the construction of the teepee as part of the tradition of the American Indian cultures. Now, as I was leaving one day from Talahi, having visited with Principal Hanson, I had the experience of just running into Jim, and he invited me inside, and he spent a lot of time going over with me the cost of making a teepee. Just the poles themselves are worth about 6 horses during the time of the 1860s. So to have this series of poles that they had to use to create a teepee was actually worth 6 horses. So they were very valuable to our American Indian culture back then in the mid-1800s. But my learning was interrupted by a group of 6-year-olds coming out of Telahi telling Mr. Rivard to please move along because it was their turn to come into the teepee and listen to Mr. Knutson. So I quickly exited the area and watched them excitingly in their mittens and their hats get to learn about more Native American and American Indian culture. This year we have also returned to in-person Knowledge Bowl competitions for our elementary kids in 5th grade. We've held 2 competitions so far this year in December, or excuse me, one in the later fall and then one in December. Our student teams practice after school together as they prepare to face off against other teams around District 742. Some of these are virtual competitions. And while the competition may be fierce, it's really the learning and expanding of kids' knowledge that makes these elementary Knowledge Bowl competitions such a success, especially as they prepare for the secondary Knowledge Bowls when those come around. And the last competitions that we're seeing going on, and it'll continue tomorrow night, is across our district. 5th through 8th graders are working and moving through the spelling bee competitions. These competitions start at the classroom level, and then they move on to having school-wide spelling bees. Each classroom will qualify a student, and those students will go maybe into a media center or a cafeteria and compete against each other. And it's a pretty big honor just to be that student representing your classroom. This year we'll have 21 students from 5th and 6th grade competing tomorrow night at Tech, and 7 students from 7th and 8th grade for this year's spelling bee. I'm excited to be one of the readers at the spelling bee, although I suspect I will mispronounce a few words. They have given me the book of the words and how to pronounce things, but I will certainly do my best. And that is tomorrow night at Tech. Dr. Putnam.
Thank you so much. So we are going to take a look. There's a little bit of a retrospective in this presentation. This is here you find a few photos of Fun-sember at South. We know that sometimes the days leading up to winter break can be a challenge. So at South, they decided to turn each day into something a little bit fun while also continuing to learn. So every day of the month, they had a dress theme. And the themes included Pajama Day, Shine and Sparkle Day, Ugly Sweater Day, and Crazy Sock Day. And here are a few photos from Flannel Day. South also in December presented the musical Lion King. It opened to rave reviews, and we want to share kudos to our students who are involved, director Kristen Maddock and artist choreographer Jody Ligueros. And then Dr. Rivard, if you'd click on that video, we'll see a brief excerpt of the production.
When he was a young warthog, when I was a young warthog. Very nice, thanks. He found his role like a certain appeal. He could clear the savannah after every meal. I'm a sensitive soul, though I seem to and it hurt that my friends never stood down with. And oh, the shame, of changing my name. Oh, what's the name? And I got down hardly. How do you feel every time that I walk? Not in front of the parents. Oh, sorry. A good Matata, what a wonderful phrase. A good Matata, ain't no rising praise.
And then we're going to switch over to the north side before returning to the south side to wrap it up. Here you can see some of the fine arts events that happened at Apollo. There are some examples of student work with pottery on the left. And then the orchestra concert was an incredible success. And those are those 2 middle pictures. So congratulations to our artists at Apollo. We also had a lot of student leadership events happening in December. Our ASU, the Apollo Student Union, organized a dodgeball tournament. Everybody survived unscathed. That was staff and students alike were involved. And then the upper picture is a a photo of a collaboration between Apollo and Tech students who were over doing volunteer work packing food for those in need. And then a very exciting opportunity tonight. We're going to be able to see the Tech High School's Trimester 1 recap. It's a celebration video put together by one of our students, 9th grader Sadie Zellman, and it was specifically made for you, the school board. So this is the recap of the successes of Tech Trimester 1, and I want to say thank you to Sadie and Principal Harris for sending this along. Again, thank you to Sadie, and we get to hear the pep band there, which is kind of nice, and we welcome any questions that you may have for us.
Just a second. Okay, anybody have any questions? Well, that's a wrap. Meeting is at 6 p.m. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in 2 weeks, Wednesday, January 19th. Thank you. Have a good night. Stay warm.